Saying that AliExpress watches are a mixed bag is an understatement. Some of them are fantastic for the money, otherwise we would not be talking about them today, but others are so bad you wonder how they even made it out of the factory. And I spent way too much time with these watches, so today I'll break down what's good, what's terrible, and show you real examples from 3 different price points. But before we do that, let's address the obvious question: why even buy from AliExpress when the established brands already cover pretty much everything? And if what you want is original design identity, something actually created by a brand, then AliExpress probably isn't the right place for you. Yes, there are a few brands out there that experiment with their own designs, and we'll get to them, but most of the bigger names focus almost entirely on homages. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because homages are exactly where AliExpress shines. Even around the $100 mark, you're already getting sapphire crystals, ceramic bezel inserts, and case finishing that just a few years ago would have been unthinkable at this price. But the tricky part is the insane number of brands out there, and many of them have zero brand identity behind them, which makes finding real value a lot harder than it should be. And this is why I decided to break things down by price level and show you real pieces from each tier so you can see what you're actually getting. And due to the sheer number of AliExpress brands, this video is also going to mention quite a few watches, and to make it easier for you to follow, I'll put links in the description to every watch I mentioned. Some of these links are going to be affiliate links which can help support the channel at no extra cost to you. And with that out of the way, let's take a look at the lowest price tier, which is under $75, which is honestly the most entertaining category, because this is where you'll find the stereotypical knockoff disasters, terrible spelling mistakes, weird QC nightmares, and the occasional watch that won't even work out of the box. But even here there is value to be found, as long as you know what you're getting into. So number 1, quality control or the complete lack of it will be an issue. Always use AliExpress buyer protection if you receive something defective. Number 2, almost everything here is going to be quartz, which is again not a bad thing, but if you can, I recommend going for Japanese quartz. Chinese quartz isn't always awful, but the Japanese stuff tends to be a bit more reliable. And number 3, metal bracelets at this price tier. There are just no miracles under $75, so keep your expectations low. Even the good ones are going to be barely usable here. And with the basics out of the way, let's talk about a brand that you should absolutely avoid unless you're a bit of a disaster tourist like me, and that brand is Liege. I normally don't care much about boxes, especially not at this price point, but the fake crocodile patterned cardboard box that this thing came in already set a bad tone with me. It looked like as if someone had stabbed on it before shipping, which perfectly foreshadowed the quality of the product that was inside. And once you pick up the watch, first impressions are not great. It is suspiciously light for its size. The listing proudly says it's made out of stainless steel, though personally I wouldn't bet on that. The bracelet is terrible, to no one's surprise. It is made out of thin folded metal that you can practically bend with your fingers. And on it there is a butterfly clasp that technically works, which is about the nicest thing that I can say here. And then there's the crystal and the dial. The listing claims again hardlex, which is adorable, knowing that that is a proprietary material to Seiko. Whatever this crystal actually is, the Cyclops magnifier is hilariously misaligned. And under it, it gets even better. The lovely people at least don't seem to know that there is a 10 times multiplier between atmospheres and meters of water resistance. So the listing says 30 atmospheres, but the dial reads 30 meters of water resistance, which is not ideal for a submariner wannabe. And instead of the intended professional, the dial simply reads profession. Setting the time is its own adventure. The crown feels like as if it could fall off at any moment, and it offers almost zero resistance while using it. So based on this, I'll let you decide if this watch was worth its $14 asking price. And let's move on to something that is a little bit more upmarket. So this next one is a different kind of homage. This time it copies another Rolex classic, the Daytona, and it comes from a brand called Benyar, and it costs significantly more, a whole $24. But honestly, that extra 10 bucks actually shows here, because at first glance the watch looks decent enough, and bonus points, it didn't arrive in a crushed cardboard box. And up close, the Benyar still holds together. The applied markers look surprisingly okay, and the shiny tachymeter bezel on it, whatever it's made of, actually looks fine. The bracelet has hollow end links, which is not surprising at this price range, but it is actually usable. But this is still a sub $30 watch, so you shouldn't stare at it too hard. Under magnification, the tachymeter printing looks just awful, and since it is only surface printed, I'd be nervous about how long it will last. And one of the dial markers is also noticeably misaligned, which kills the quality illusion pretty quickly. And on the tactile front, the Benyar isn't doing much better than the Liege. It has a P903 chronograph movement inside, which feels just as rough. And the hand layout is also bizarre. The big central hand that looks like a chronograph hand is actually the running seconds, and the real chronograph function lives on a tiny subdial, which is very confusing at first glance. But still, to be fair, the Benyar's overall quality is easily on par with many of the mainstream fashion watches, and at $24 it costs only a fraction of the price. So if you just want something that looks decent enough and tells the time, it can be a perfectly acceptable choice. By now you can see why I'm very cautious when making brand recommendations in this price range. Even Benyar, which we just saw can make a halfway decent chronograph, also has some truly awful models. So the point I'm trying to make is that quality can jump all over the place, even within the same brand. Still, if I had to name two relatively safe bets, it would be these. The cheapest brand I'd personally buy from is Skmei, but only their digital models. They are very inexpensive and perfectly fine for what they are, though honestly for a few dollars more you are probably better off with a Casio. And if you want an analog watch in this price range, then Addiesdive's entry-level quartz pieces are surprisingly solid. They are easily among the best under $75. And aside from the ones we've already looked at, I've also handled a bunch of other budget names like Bernie, Naviforce, Megir and Tevis, etc. Some of their models were actually completely fine, but some were just hot garbage. So just to reiterate, quality in this tier can swing so widely that you just can't recommend some brands as a whole. If you're considering anything from this price range, you must do your research on a model by model basis. So yeah, under 75 bucks you can get fun junk, a lot of questionable pieces, and the occasional watch that's actually worth owning, but only if you know what you're looking for. So that's about it about the entry-level category. Let's move on to the much more interesting mid-tier. And by mid-tier I mean watches between $75 to $200, and this is where AliExpress watches get genuinely compelling. The quality control, while still not amazing, it actually exists here. Sapphire crystals start showing up, ceramic bezel inserts appear, and inside the watches you'll find Seiko NH and even occasionally Miyota movements. And this is also the first price tier where you can find some pretty decent metal bracelets. And to illustrate in practice what the mid-range can deliver, let's start with the brand that has clearly dominated this segment in recent years, and that is Pagani Design. This model is another Daytona homage that costs around $75, and basically it's the entry ticket into this tier. But even at the very bottom at the price range, it's still light years ahead of the Benyar, both in terms of materials and execution. For starters, you're getting a ceramic bezel insert, a sapphire crystal, a bracelet with solid end links, and a genuinely decent mil clasp, which is honestly shocking at this price. Inside the watch you'll find a Seiko VK63 Mecha Quartz movement that gives you that smooth sweeping chronograph hand without the full mechanical cost. And this all sounds great on paper, but the perceived quality isn't as good as the specifications would suggest. The case and the bracelet are almost fully polished, the brushing on the link sides is extremely basic, and while the clasp is milled, which is again great, it still feels cheap in actual use. The safety latch on mine pops open too easily, and the clasp action itself is pretty stiff. But weirdly enough, the bezel is where Pagani actually decided to try. The engraving and the printing are shockingly sharp. They are way better than they have any right to be at $75. But at the end of the day, you're still reminded that this is a cheap watch. The chronograph hand is slightly misaligned, one of the markers is off. It is not as bad as on the Benyar, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. And on top of that, my wife somehow managed to crack the ceramic bezel insert. Full disclosure here, I've never seen any other broken ceramic bezel inserts myself, but the material on this one does look unusually thin. Still, at $75, if you manage to get your hand on a Pagani design that has no QC issues, it's an absolute steal. With these materials and the VK63 inside, it's a seriously impressive watch for the money. But just to prove that not all Chinese brands are created equal, let's take a quick detour and take a look at another Daytona style homage, this time from Parnis, and it's clearly a step down in quality. Full disclaimer, I bought this one back in 2019, so the quality might have changed since then, though honestly I really doubt it. It cost around $75 back then, and on paper it looked like a steal, just like the Pagani design. It had sapphire crystal, ceramic bezel insert, and the same Seiko VK63 movement. But this watch is the perfect example of why specifications don't tell the whole story. Even the first impressions are bad with this one. The ceramic insert looks awful. It has this weird rough sandpaper-like texture, the engraving is sloppy, and the paint feeling is just terrible. The case finishing is also noticeably worse than on the Pagani design. The chronograph pushers feel cheap to use. Everything in general just feels less refined. And then there's the bracelet, or actually there isn't because I can't even show it to you. It was flimsy right out of the box and had a hideous Parnis engraving on the clasp, and it literally fell apart just after a few months of use. And this exact model appears to be still on sale on AliExpress today. Now it costs around $100, and the recent reviews on it are just brutal. And based on that and my own experience, I'm pretty confident it's still not worth your money. But let's see what happens if you decide to stretch your budget a little bit further. And this is how we get to the Addiesdive AD2086, which costs around $120, and it is an absolute spec monster for the price. And unlike the Parnis, this one doesn't just look good on paper. So the materials and the execution are genuinely impressive. It has a sapphire crystal with AR coating, a fully lumed ceramic bezel, and a reliable, if slightly boring, Seiko MH35. And Addiesdive actually aimed for a more original design, which is refreshing in a sea of straight-up homages. And unlike all of the watches we've looked at so far, this one does survive the macro test. The dial is clean, the bezel engraving is impressively sharp, everything looks good even up close. But when we get to the bracelet and the clasp is when you're reminded that this is still a budget piece. The bracelet has solid end links, yes, but the brushing on it is very basic, and the clasp is the same folded metal style you'll find on Seiko 5s. But honestly, if Seiko can get away with this at $500, I'm not going to complain too loudly here. Speaking of complaints, there is a negative about this watch that needs to be mentioned. The Addiesdive logo is so unique that for some people it can potentially be a deal breaker. And now that we have taken a look at a few examples from the mid-range, I need to warn you that this is where AliExpress variety can become truly overwhelming. So to make it easier to navigate the mid-level, let's mention a few other brands that are pretty good. The first one is Escapement Time, which is great for vintage military-inspired or dressier watches. Their quality is fantastic, but their stock can be a bit unpredictable since they are run by a single gentleman. Steel Dive can be another strong pick for affordable, mostly Seiko-styled pieces. And then there's Tandorio, Cadisen, Corjo and Liege, which can offer solid models at around the $100 mark, but their quality fluctuates noticeably more than the other brands. So once again, you need to do your research on a model-by-model basis. And now let's move on to the big dogs watches in the $200 and up range. And to show what this tier can deliver, we have to talk about San Martin, which is easily the best known AliExpress brand. This is their entry-level SN017, the Water Ghost, that was clearly inspired by the Starbucks Submariner. I picked up mine on a sale for around $180 about a year ago, and spoilers, at that price it was simply phenomenal. The dial is beautifully executed, it has a sapphire crystal with AR coating, the bezel insert engravings are razor sharp, and the bezel action also felt great. And if I have to pick a favorite detail from this watch, it would be the mix of brushed and polished surfaces on the bezel grip. It looks amazing even under a macro lens. And the bracelet is just as impressive as the rest of the watch. It has solid end links, it has clean, even brushing on its surface, and it comes with a fully milled clasp, which feels surprisingly premium. Inside the watch you'll find a trusty Seiko NH35, and mine run about 4 seconds fast per day, which is excellent performance for this movement. And since last year this model was slightly updated, the newer version now uses the PT5000 movement, and they also made some small other refinements. But now the Water Ghost is priced well over $200, so it's not quite the insane bargain that it used to be. The movement is definitely a higher tier than the old NH35, but I'm not fully convinced it is going to be as worry-free. And speaking of reliability, remember that lovely bezel action I mentioned just a few seconds earlier? After swimming with my SN017 this summer, the bezel ended up stuck solid. Maybe it's just my own bad luck or a QC issue, but it didn't exactly boost my confidence. Still, the overall quality is outstanding on this watch. If you want a high-end homage, it is very hard to go wrong with San Martin. And as I promised it in the intro, let's give San Martin some extra credit here because their original designs are getting genuinely strong too. My current favorite from them is the SN017, which has an integrated bracelet and it looks just fantastic in person. So San Martin definitely earns its reputation, but if I had to pick my own favorite high-end AliExpress brand, it would have to be Baltany. I currently own 2 Baltany watches. One is inspired by the legendary Rolex MilSub and the other one is based on the equally special official vintage Datejust reference 1600, and they easily match San Martin in terms of quality and sometimes even surpass them. And just to give you two examples from my own watches, the MilSub bezel action feels unbelievably good. It honestly wouldn't be out of place on a watch well north of $2,000. And the Datejust has a detail that you can't even see at first glance. It has a Riholt engraving that matches the minute markers, which looks great even under a macro lens. And just like San Martin, Baltany also started experimenting with their original designs. The best recent example of that is the S4105, which has an Explorer style 39mm case and the 3D textured gradient dial, which makes it feel fresh without losing that classic charm. And once again, I don't think that packaging is very important, especially when it comes to AliExpress watches, but Baltany deserves some credit here because the leather pouch and the branded toolkit that they include with every single watch they sell are surprisingly high quality, which is a nice extra when it comes to unboxing them. And since Baltany is still a slightly less known brand on AliExpress that uses mostly Seiko automatic movements, their pricing usually falls below San Martin, around the $200 to $250 range, which makes them a genuinely strong value in this tier. And speaking of strong value, before we go to the conclusion, let me mention a few other high-end brands that I had experience with. Kronos in general makes very high-quality homages. I had hands-on experience with their IWC style pieces, and I was not disappointed. Shuges is great if you want mechanical chronographs. They use primarily seagull movements, which can be a pro or a con depending on your preferences. Seastern is excellent when it comes to Doxa and Glashütte inspired homages. Heimdallr is great if you're into higher-end Seiko style divers. XDAO started making some truly high-end vintage homages lately. They are on the pricier side, but their quality is very impressive for AliExpress. And lastly, Octopus Kraken, despite the ridiculous name, made a real splash with their Explorer 1 style homages. They are again on the pricier side, but the quality is up there. So to wrap things up, AliExpress is definitely a mixed bag. The entry level is a bit of a gamble. The mid-range is where real value starts, and the high-end shows how far brands like San Martin and Baltany have come. So the bottom line is the value is there, you just need to know where to look, and hopefully this video helped. And if you made it this far, then first of all, thank you. If you want more watch content like this, then consider subscribing. If I missed the brand that you think is worth mentioning, then feel free to drop it in the comments. And once again, I put links to every watch in the description. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.